right, cool. All right, so this is episode 62 of Tech Talk Live, and today we are talking about share customizations with Mr. Share Customization himself, Will Abson. And before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this session is being recorded, so take that into account. And we will send out the slides and the session recording after sometime within about 24 hours after the talk. One thing to know is I've heard from several of you who are on Linux platforms, and I know that it's a pain and actually not possible to watch the recordings on Linux, and we're going to do something about that. So within the next couple of Tech Talk Lives, we may end up switching from WebEx to something else, so that everyone, regardless of what their desktop choice is, can get their hands on this good content. Another plug I want to get out of the way before we get going here is if you have not already signed up to become a registered developer at developer.alfresco.com, then you ought to do that. By doing that, you can register API keys that allow you to write applications against Alfresco in the cloud. So if you are someone who is developing custom solutions on top of Alfresco, and you must be, otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this topic, then you should register yourself as a developer and get your API keys and look through the documentation and learn how to make API calls against Alfresco in the cloud. So definitely go to developer.alfresco.com and take a look. All right, so we should get going here, and I'm looking forward to this talk, definitely will, but also I know that it's going to make me feel bad that I haven't ported some of my own customizations to Alfresco 4.2 yet. So I will, everything that you're about to say is going to get me revved up to go do that, I hope. So I'm looking forward to it from that aspect. So Will Abson, one of our most frequent guests on Tech Talk Live, how are things going with you?
Yeah, they're going good, thanks, Jeff. So you might be aware I've been working in the engineering team now for around 6 months or so, contributing to some of the integrations that we've been working on, Google Docs being the main one, I think, that I've worked on over the last few months. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about that work during this presentation. I'm going to talk about some of the ongoing work that I've also been doing, kind of on the side with Share Extras, which is the long-standing projects that I've owned. But equally, some of the stuff that I'm discussing here around Share Extensibility is relevant to any add-on for Alfresco, whether that's produced internally within part of an Alfresco team or produced externally by partners, or produced out there by community members. So yeah, hopefully some of what I talk about today will be relevant to everyone on the call.
Yeah, I mean, I think it also reminds me that I should tell people to go to addons.alfresco.com, and you can find all of the Share Extras projects listed there, as well as 200 or so other add-ons that people have created. Not all of them are share customizations, but certainly a lot of them are. And I would remind people that are listening, if you do have an entry in the add-ons directory, you might go edit that entry, because we've, within the last couple of months, have added some metadata fields to those to the system, so that you can tag your entry and say, this is a share customization, this works with 4.2, this, requires a repo extension, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of different metadata that you could tag your add-ons with, and then that makes it easier for people to find. So definitely take a look at add-ons, and you'll see a bunch of the good work that Will and the rest of his Share Extras team have been working on. Well, why don't we jump right into it then, Will, and as usual, I'll pick some really awkward times to interject some questions here as we go along. And but other than that, I'm going to turn it over to you to see what you got for us.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. Okay, so I want to spend probably about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, going through a couple of examples from Share Extras. Now, as Jeff mentioned, the topic of this Tech Talk Live is regarding the extensibility in Share. Now, that was a new feature that came in the Alfresco, initially in the Alfresco 4.0 Enterprise timeline, and then a lot of that's been consolidated further with Community 4.2. And in Community 4.2, there was a lot of discussion at DevCon about how this platform, this extensibility platform that the team have been working on putting into Share is something quite solid now that can be used to get around a lot of the drawbacks that previously were there when you were building solutions on top of Share. So I'm going to highlight a couple of examples in Share Extras that we've managed to port over to this new framework. Now, as Jeff said, there is clearly a migration exercise that people need to go through if you have existing add-ons. I want to show a couple of the add-ons that we within Share Extras have ported over to use the new framework and some of the benefits that has brought. And I'm going to dive into the code during this and show you actually how these new extensibility features are being used within JavaScript, within FreeMarker. So we'll see a bit of that as well as some practical demos. So this is the structure of the talk here. Now, the first three items there after the introduction, they refer to one specific add-on that I'll introduce in a second. And then I also want to talk about, just at the end, another add-on which demonstrates how these features are being used in a slightly different way, which is the Media Viewers add-on. And I'll come to that afterwards. So we'll come back to that. So for now, I'll just introduce myself. Now, as Jeff mentioned, I've done a couple of Tech Talk Lives previously, I think mostly around the topic of Share customization. I'm also a full-time integrations engineer at Alfresco. And I'm specifically the creator of the site's GeoTags content add-on, which is the add-on that I want to spend the bulk of this session talking about. Now, I'm building on a previous Tech Talk Live here, and this is a Tech Talk Live that was delivered by Dave Draper. Dave is, along with Eric Winloaf, the main engineer responsible for a lot of the extensibility work that's gone into Share in 4.0, 4.1, and 4.2. So it's really thanks to those guys that we're able to build these add-ons and show some of these features here today. Dave's Tech Talk Live can be viewed online via the live page on the Alfresco wiki. And in addition to that, if you didn't get to the DevCon events or you didn't make it to see this talk, then Dave and Eric's talk, which is called Share Customizations Live, is really worth watching on the DevCon website. You can watch it via YouTube, and I think you can download the slides direct from there as well. So if you're not completely au fait with Share extensibility, or some of the things that I mentioned maybe go over your head a bit, then it's definitely worth catching up on those two items there. And I've got another couple of links on the last slide as well, links to blog articles that may also be useful.
And it might also be worth mentioning that those guys have blogs that are pretty good resources. I don't know if that's in your link page or not, Will, but Dave and Eric and those guys have that's a good set of resources.
Yep. That's I use those blogs myself, so they're always a good resource to go to. Okay, so I just want to skip over quickly for people who maybe haven't seen those presentations, just the main points that relate to extensibility that we're going to be demonstrating with these examples that I'm going to talk about here. So the main thing that came in the 4.0, 4.2 timeframe is this notion of an extension. So previously within Alfresco Share, the way that you changed the behavior of Share was by overriding components. Now, that's perhaps useful for some certain types of configuration, but as a developer, the drawback of overriding components is that you can only ever do that once. So if I'm a partner and I develop an add-on that extends the document details page in Alfresco, the danger is if the customer deploys my add-on and also an add-on from another partner that extends that page in a different way, that those add-ons can't both be applied at the same time. Now, the idea of these extensions is that it's much more akin to the Spring framework on which Alfresco is built, and you're injecting in extra bits of capabilities where you require those within the Share application. Now, the extensions are based around these modules, and modules are declared on the class path, specifically within Alfresco site data extensions. Now, there's a number of different things that you can do with these modules, and the examples will show each of these as we go through them. So firstly, you can change the general behavior of a component by modifying the in-memory model that, if you've used a web script before, you'll be familiar with the concept of a JavaScript controller. That sets up some items in the in-memory model, then gets passed over to the free marker. So depending on what objects are being set in the JavaScript controller, you can use an extension module to override or augment the controller. You might add additional objects to that model or change some of the ones that have been previously added. So that's the first way that you can change the behavior of components. You may also, or instead of, want to add, remove, or replace HTML markup that's provided by the existing out-of-the-box component. Now, there's a couple of different options for that. There are two directives, one called region. These are free marker directives. Now, region operates on the component level itself, which is basically in Share akin to a web script. And in 4.2, specifically from 4.2, there was a lot of work that went into converting Share and putting in different areas within components that are defined by these markup directives. And using those markup directives, which are a little more specific, you can inject in your code within a specific region. So those two directives, region and markup, can be used to augment, replace, or get rid of entirely the HTML markup that's provided by a component. The other thing that you might want to do that's related to HTML is, as well as the body markup itself, you might want to put extra elements within the page head components. So within the HTML page, you've got a head and a body component. So a minute ago, we were talking about the body components. Within the head of the HTML document, you've got JavaScript and CSS resources primarily. And using the .head.ftl template within web scripts, you could add additional items within there. So you might have custom JavaScript classes that you need to include in the page. And this allows you to do this. So in 4.0 and 4.1, the way that you did this was to provide, with your module, an additional .head.ftl extension. In 4.2, that's changed slightly, and you can now define those additional client-side dependencies directly in your .html.ftl file. So that was the one that we talked about a second ago when you're defining the body markup. And 4.2 defines a script and link directive that ensures that that content actually gets placed in the head component of the HTML page when that's rendered. And there's been a lot of work that's gone into that that's actually detailed on Dave and Eric's blogs if you want to do some background reading around why that is. But there is a difference there. If you're including your client-side components in 4.0 or 4.2, you'll want to use this latter mechanism using html.ftl in 4.2 because the previous .head.ftl is actually now deprecated in 4.2. So just be aware of that. And then the last thing that we'll probably want to do when we're providing an extensibility module is we'll want to update the user interface, perhaps with additional UI labels, and we can do that in a properties file. So we can extend the properties that are defined by an out-of-the-box web script just by adding our own. We don't need to reproduce the ones that are declared already by the web script. The extensibility module ensures that the additional properties that we define will be read in addition to the ones that are already there. So that's just a quick summary of what these extensibility modules provide. Now, the first example that I mentioned that I wanted to talk about that illustrates some of these points is this add-on called the Site GeoTagged Content add-on. Now, this was initially put together for Alfresco 4.0, I believe, and the reason for putting that together for 4.0 was because in the 4.0 release, Alfresco had embedded the Tika metadata parsing engine, and Tika gave us the ability within Alfresco to strip out and index a lot more information about content that's added to Alfresco. So in the context of digital photos, for instance, if you take a picture on your iPhone, that is automatically going to include the latitude and longitude of that picture that has been recorded by the GPS unit in the iPhone. Same on most Android phones. So if you then drag and drop those photos into the Alfresco repository, Alfresco automatically indexes that information in the background. Now on the right-hand side, you see what that looks like in the document details screen. So you see the properties there. It captured some basic EXIF information from the camera, as well as the geo information, that latitude and longitude at the bottom. Now there is an action that's also exposed in Share, and that action allows you to view that photo on a Google map. So that's quite a useful action. It's probably a bit more user-friendly than just displaying latitude and longitude there in the document details page. But the idea of this add-on is that if you've got, say, 100 or 200 photos within your site, you actually want to see all of those photos together in a map view rather than just one by one in a map view. So that's what this add-on provides. And specifically, it uses Google Maps to do this. That's what the dashless looks like here. Now, originally, it was just a dashlet. It was a site dashlet here, and that's all it provided. So you see one pin there. Actually, I think it's a couple of pins, but you can't see them because it's not quite zoomed in enough on that picture. But the idea of the dashless is that it displays all of the items that are in that site there on that dashless that you have on your site dashboard there. So that's originally what the Site GeoTagged dashless provided. Now in 4.2, one of the really interesting things that you can do is you can also provide those sorts of custom views in the document library itself. So this looks similar to the previous screenshot, but you'll notice that we're no longer on the dashboard, we're directly in a folder of the document library within Share. And this is a custom document library view that's been implemented in addition to the dashless within the Site GeoTagged Content add-on. So very similar, it's displaying the content of your document library And it's displaying it in a different place there. Again, it's using Google Maps to do that, and it's displaying a pin for each item in the currently selected folder. There is a slight difference between these two. Now, I'll demonstrate this in a minute, but just a little bit more information on document library views first. So we can add in as many of these document library views as we want to as developers. As I mentioned, it's exposed in Community 4.2 from A onwards, from release A onwards. Or if you're an enterprise customer, it was also made available in the 4.0 release and the 4.1 releases from 4.02 onwards. There's a lot more information available from developer, Ray Gauss, who implemented this capability, and that's on his blog. You can click on that link there within the slide, that's hyperlinked to go there, and I've also included that link at the end of the presentation on the very last slide. On the implementation side of these document library views, the main thing that you need to provide is the client-side renderer class, or perhaps at least an instance of a client-side renderer class. So we'll see how that's done when we step through the example in a minute. Now, the geographic renderer that we're using to display this custom geographic view is actually built on top of the thumbnail renderer, and it was the thumbnail renderer that Ray was responsible for adding to Alfresco Share in the 4.0 Enterprise and 4.2 Community releases. So
the thumbnail renderer is the same thing as what we call the gallery view, right?
That's right, yeah. So the gallery view is the feature that's provided by the thumbnail renderer which implements that. That's correct, okay. Jeff. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So although I'm extending this gallery view or thumbnail renderer, I'm actually changing quite a lot of the behavior. So I need to define a few things here. Now, first off, I'm going to define a module. So the reason I talked about extensibility modules is this is the mechanism that we're using here to load this custom renderer into Share here. So I'm going to need to provide an XML definition there to describe that module. I'm going to need to provide some more HTML marker in order to add that renderer to the page, make sure it gets instantiated in the right place, and make sure it gets bound to the document library code. And that's mostly client-side code that's running there. There's also a little bit of work, a very small amount of work I need to do in the server-side JavaScript. So this is the JavaScript Controller of the document list component in order to ensure that it also knows about the custom view. And then the bulk of the code is actually found on the client side. So in common with most of Share, a lot of the work for rendering the actual UI is done in client-side JavaScript. So there's a specific class that I've implemented, and to do that I've extended the thumbnail view, and it's called a GeoViewRenderer. Then lastly, there's a couple of things that I need to implement in the UI. I need to provide an icon for my view so that the user can select that. You can see that on the far right-hand side of the screenshot there, and that last little item in the list of 4. That's what the icon for the GeoView looks like, and that's just a couple of images, one pale blue for off, one dark blue for on, and there's some CSS that ensures that that is displayed in the right place. So I can walk through these components here that I'm providing. Firstly, the XML module definition. There's not a huge amount to see here. All this is doing is it's binding in our customization to the document details web scripts. So then within that org.shareextras customization doclib geoview package, I've got some further files that will extend the files within the document list component that's already provided in Share. So this is the path. If you look at that document list.get.html file that's listed at the top there, look at the path of that. It's components document library document list.get.html.ftl, and if you append that to org alfresco, which you saw in the override path in the XML markup in the last screen, you should be able to find that file that I'm overriding, or at least augmenting here, within Share. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm using a markup section. So I mentioned these markup sections have now been added in various places in Share, and they allow you to inject additional HTML markup from a free markup file directly into that existing component. So I'm injecting this additional code into the document list markup that's going to be rendered by Share. So I'm providing some HTML elements here. I've actually skipped a bit. If you were to look at this file that's in the Share Extras source code, you'd find that there's a little bit more here, but I'm just showing the initial few elements here, and the important bit at the bottom, which is the client-side JavaScript. And this ensures that the client-side class, I mentioned the bulk of the logic is implemented in a client-side class. That object is being instantiated in this script here, in this little script list that will be rendered to the page. I did provide a link to Ray's blog post, so I'm not going to provide a detailed explanation because his blog post already does that on how this little bit of script works. But basically, just accept that what that's doing is it's setting up an instance of my client-side class that's going to do the work, and it's tying that to the document library view, which is known as scope here. So that's the additional HTML markup. I'm also providing an addition to the JavaScript controller for document list.get, and I'm adding in this custom renderer called Geo. This second bit wouldn't generally be required, but I'm using it here, and you'll see why I'm defining this item here in a second when I come to show the next part of the example. So I'm actually providing the name of my custom client-side class that I've implemented here. And if I just go back to the free market in the previous file for a minute, you see the second to last bit in bold on the slide here, where it says new GeoRenderer Class, is where it's using that variable that's being set in the JavaScript controller. So you'll see why I've made that a variable in the JavaScript controller in a minute. I don't have to for this specific part. I could have just put that string, that extras.document.list gmaps geoview renderer. That's a mouthful. I could have put that directly in the free marker code itself if I'd wanted to. Then the client-side class itself. So again, this pattern is documented on Ray's blog. I'm in the standard way for declaring a client-side object within Share. I'm providing a constructor that will set up a bunch of properties for the object, and then I'm extending off an existing base class here. I'm providing some additional methods which will override the behavior in that base class. I'm going to do some work to set up the renderer, and then this render view method will fire when the user selects the view. Those two could happen simultaneously at the same time, but perhaps if I've got another view set up as the default one, setup render will fire when the page is loaded, and render view will fire when I then click on the document view, on the document geo view, if I do that. So the code is a lot longer than this in reality. Again, I've provided the full path of this client-side JavaScript class, so you can look at that in its entirety in the source code if you wish to do that. Just be aware this is the class that's defining most of the behavior that happens. Okay. So at this stage, I've probably shown enough code for now. Let's just have a look at what the add-on is providing in the Share UI using the code that I've just demonstrated. So I'm going to log in as admin here. I'm using the sample site that ships with Share.
You need to.
I do need to share my screen. You're right, Maxine. WebEx gets me every time. Okay. So hopefully you should now see my screen. I'm logged into this sample site that ships with Alfresco, and I've added a custom dashlet to the site dashboard there. So that was the custom dashlet that was always shipped with the add-on. If I go into the document library, you see I just see the normal view. On the top right here, you see the different views that I can select, the simple view or the gallery view, which is the view that Ray implemented, and the reason why the framework changes were made here to allow us to add extra ones. Now, I've already added the jar module to Share. So if I go into my module deployment screen, you should see this at the bottom. I've got this document list geographic view. I'm going to add that and apply the changes. So Share now has that loaded. And refresh the screen. I've now got an extra icon here on the right-hand side, which is my geographic view. I can click that, and it shows me a map view. Now, I'm in the root of the document library at the moment, and there's nothing in there except folders. If I go into this Photos folder here, you'll see that suddenly the items that I have here appear. Very similar to the gallery view, which I mentioned this extended. You can click on an item, you can perform actions, and you get a thumbnail preview and a little bit of information about that item there. And you can also click through to the full document details screen using that hyperlink. So that's what this add-on provides. This custom view in the document library is enabled using the module there, as I enabled. Okay. So I'm just going to go back to the slides.
That is really cool, Will, by the way. Just no one else, you can't hear anyone else, but I think probably there's 20 other people going, that is awesome. That is just a good, really good use of a document library view, and really shows how sort of extreme you can get. Like, it doesn't have to be always lists of folders and things in folders.
Yeah, well, actually, Ray has a really good example on his blog. But what his example does is it takes one of the existing renderer classes and it customizes the properties of that. I think specifically from memory, it makes the thumbnails bigger, which is, again, a valid thing to do. But what I wanted to show here was an example where you're actually providing a custom class to do, some real off-the-wall stuff here. And again, this is possible using modules. Okay. So I want to go a little further than that with this view here. So I should be on the next slide now. Tell me if you can't see that. And I've been using Google Docs to do this demo, and Google Docs is great. We use Google Docs in the products. It implements the doclib action that I mentioned that allows you to locate a single item on a map, and it's great. But there is an alternative that I've been playing around with in my spare time, which is called Leafless. It's an alternative to Google Maps. It's open source, uses very modern, lightweight technologies like HTML5. It's designed to be mobile friendly. I think the biggest benefit of of this framework is that it allows you to plug in map tiles from any commercial or non-commercial mapping provider. And there's a whole host of these out there, both commercial and non-commercial. So this is separating the map viewer itself from the provider of the map tiles. So the screenshot there shows OpenStreetMap, which I'm also a contributor to in my local area, but there's a wide range of other mapping providers out there that you can use, and that's the website for Leafless. So what I want to show is how you can use another extensibility module to change the behavior of this first extensibility module. So I'm going to use a second module for this. Notice that the order of the extensibility modules is important. So I'll have to make sure that's right when I get to the demo. I've not got as many files as I'm providing here, so this should be a bit quicker to go through. Again, I've got a module definition, and then I've got some additional server-side JavaScript that I'm extending the document list components with. That's the XML definition for the module. Very similar, except that I've got a slightly different file name. It has Leafless on the end, and the source package root again has Leafless on the end. But I'm extending the same components here. If you see that path there, again it's components document library document list.get.js. It's the same file that I had up before. Now remember that that variable called GeoRenderer Class I mentioned that I didn't have to externalize in my JavaScript file. The reason for me doing it is so that I can provide an additional JavaScript controller override that overrides that custom variable. So I've highlighted in bold on the last line here the difference between the initial file and this file. So here I'm saying this is going to be a leaflet renderer. So this is a different class again, and that extends off the previous class. Again, you can look in the source code for the client-side file that I brought up on screen earlier, and that actually contains both classes there. In fact, they extend off a common base class, which you'll see if you open up that file and take a look at. They're subtly different. The capability is generally the same, but it's just a different mapping provider is going to provide here. Okay, so let's see if we can demo this. Again, I'll share my screen. Okay, so this is my view. Again, I'm going to go into my custom modules here. If I scroll down, I've got this document list geographic view using Leafless. I'm going to add that, apply my changes. As I mentioned, the order is important here, so I must ensure that the leaflet one comes after the first one that I added. Otherwise, it won't override this in the correct order, because I'm overriding this first one with my second module. So let's just now refresh the page. You see I've got a different mapping provider there. So I can zoom in. I didn't really demonstrate this with the Google Maps integration. You can see the photos from my last holiday the other week. And it's very similar capabilities. In fact, that pop-up is exactly the same. It's the common code that's implemented that. The difference in the code is just the way it renders the map up front initially there. So there we go. The last thing I want to demonstrate with this add-on, if I come back to the slides, okay. We can do a similar thing to that with other out-of-the-box components with Alfresco. Now, as I pointed out, the key to me being able to customize that map view there was the fact that in my controller JavaScript, I had populated the model with the name of the class, the client-side class that was going to be used to perform the rendering. So that was pretty important. Now, one of the really exciting things for me, that one of the changes that was made in 4.2, particularly around the 4.2b timeframe, was that most, if not all, of the out-of-the-box components were converted to put a lot more stuff within that model, within the JavaScript controller of web scripts. And that means that you can intervene before that stuff gets rendered out in order to completely change the behavior of those JavaScript widgets, if you like, that are being used to render the page. So I'm going to demonstrate this using the dashlet that I showed earlier. So I'm not going to dive into the code from this. It's fairly similar to the code that we saw a minute ago. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So again, I'm in Share. I go back to my dashboard into the sample site that we saw earlier. So you see that at the moment this dashlet is still using Google Maps. Haven't done anything to change that. Now I'm going to go back to my modules page here. And at the bottom you might have noticed that I had a second leaflet module. And if I add that to the list, click Apply, that's now added to Share. You see that now the dashlet also uses Leafless. So that's the third example here. And the reason why this is interesting is because it's changing the behavior of a specific component. The previous example changed the behavior of a custom component, but this is how you can use a similar approach to redefine the behavior of out-of-the-box widgets. So you could do this with other dashlets within Share. You can add a little bit of code and a custom JavaScript controller, add that into Extensibility module, and you've changed the behavior of that. Okay. So again, you can take a look at the code for that. I mentioned that's another Extensibility module. It is part of the site's GeoTags contents dashlet that I've got a link for in the last slide here. You can go into Google Code, check out the code from SVN, or review it online if you want, and really see how that's done. But the key thing here, let's go back a slide for a second. The key thing is the conversion of the out-of-the-box component to use this model.widgets object that's populated by the controller JavaScript. And it allows us to intervene before we get to the create widgets free marker directive that's actually responsible for rendering widgets. Dave and Eric talked about this in length, particularly during DevCon, so again, definitely check out those resources if you want to know more. Okay, last example here. So I want to show you something subtly different here. And here we're going to change the configuration of an existing component in Alfresco. So I've just shown some photos so far within my site, but also within my site I've got some documents. I've got some custom documents I've added, and I've got some of the out-of-the-box documents that ship with this sample site in Alfresco. And the example that I'm going to use, the example add-on, is the Media Viewers add-on. So this isn't the site geotagged content add-on, this is the Media Viewers add-on. Specifically, this is the PDF JS viewer that we added in to Media Viewers 2.0. This is myself and Peter Lufgren, who's another contributor on Share Extras, and in fact we just put out the 2.5 release of Media Viewers with a load more capabilities in the PDF.js viewer. So it's worth checking that out if you get a chance. Now, I'm just going to show quickly the main way that I'm changing the behavior of the document previews in Share. I'm overriding that's actually slightly incorrect, sorry, the title there. So it's not the document list web script, it's actually the web preview web script here. I'll make sure that's updated in the final slide. But the web preview.get component is responsible in Share for rendering the document previews that you see in the Share user interface. And this JavaScript extension, which is part of another custom module, is going in and it's going to modify the data that's been set up by that component already. So we've got an if statement up front there. We're saying if this widget's object is in the model, it might not be if we're running in a version of Alfresco before 4.2. And if it is, we're going to iterate through the widgets that have been set up by the controller. And a widget, for a dashlet, a widget is things like, it'll be the client-side code that provides the main implementation of the dashlet, but you could also have additional ones if you have title bar actions or if you have a dashlet resizer. It's basically, a widget is any bit of, it's any instantiation of a JavaScript class that's going to be set up on the page to implement some custom behavior. So we need to iterate through the widgets that are provided. And if we found the web preview widget, then we've got hold of the client-side class that actually does the work of rendering these web previews, these document previews within Share. Now, the way that works, I won't go into the full details, but there is a file called webpreview.get.config.xml, and those files, those config files, can be fairly important, and they're very important for the web previewer because they define exactly which viewers are used to display specific files. So it could be a video file, you want to display a video player. It could be a document file, you want to use the Flash previewer. And I want to override that behavior. I want to say, if this is a PDF file, use this custom view of my own instead of the Flash previewer. And this custom preview is using the PDF.js project to do the hard work of rendering that. So I can't modify that XML config directly from an extensibility module, but effectively I can, because that config is actually read in by the webpreview.get.js controller. I have the ability to go in afterwards and actually play around with the data that's been passed to the web preview widgets from that config file. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm spitting in some additional conditions at the start of the chain, and I'm going to say, if this is a PDF document, use this specific viewer to do it. So again, I've shortened the code there. It's definitely worth having a look at the full code that's part of the Media Viewers plugin, and it's the PDF.js viewer specifically. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to demo is that viewer here. So again, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go into the document library. I'm going to turn off that GeoView because in this instance it's not really helpful. I want to look at documents and go into this contracts area. You notice I've got a few different custom items here. PDF documents. This is the out-of-the-box Flash previewer. So I've decided I don't like this. I want to replace it with this custom viewer. If you wondered where these additional modules on the left-hand side are from, they're all provided by the Media Viewers add-on. In this case, I only want to add this PDF.js viewer. The Viewer module just adds in the necessary client-side components, but this configuration module that works on 4.2 to update that config as well. So they're both important there. So now with those enabled, I think I pressed the right button. I should be able to refresh the page. Now that looks like a fairly similar view, but I can tell you that that's not the Flash previewer. That is being rendered in HTML5 by PDF.js, and that's an entirely new implementation of the web preview components there that I've added. And it's all using extensibility modules. Okay. So if you want more information, I've included a few links there. You can see the main link to Share Extras. There's also the links to Dave Draper's Tech Talk Live slides that he covered back in May, as well as his blog. And Jeff mentioned this, he had a bunch of other links as well, some more blog links that are no doubt are also useful. So I do hope that's been an interesting overview of how we're using extensibility modules in Share Extras. Jeff, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we
yeah, I mean, a couple of questions, and also if you folks that are listening have questions, please type those into the chat, and we will make sure that Will answers your questions. The first thing is on Share Extras, the project itself. Is it still on Google Code, or I know at one time there was talk of moving over to GitHub, and kind of what's the latest there?
Okay. So there's been a lot of work ongoing within the project just to get this 2.5 release out of Media Viewers, but now that's been out a couple of weeks, I'm actually getting a bit more time to sit back and do some of the work that's been on the backlog for a while, like starting to move over projects from Google Code to GitHub. So the first one that was moved, the first two that have been moved over were the Reset Password Dialog project, and the Media Viewers project. So they're both being hosted on GitHub. We're still using Google Code for now for the main project site, and shareextras.org just redirect there for now. Hopefully over time we'll use GitHub more and more. But I think the main benefit of GitHub to me is that by putting the code up there, you're allowing people to go off and fork it and add their own features and contribute those back in a much more scalable way. So I really hope that we can benefit from that straight away, and we'll see some of the additional benefits of GitHub flow through to the project, at a later date.
Yep. Okay, so and hopefully Pierre Luigi asked whether Share Extras on Google Code is being updated, and so hopefully that answers the question, Pierre Luigi. I mean, there's definitely updates happening very regularly on that project. So
yeah, but I would say, if there are add-ons that you're interested in seeing additional updates for, some are certainly more active than others. It's really according to demand. If you have something in mind, either issues or enhancements, it's definitely worth posting those to the issue list if they're not already posted. Or if they are already posted, just add your name to the list there. If it's an existing bug or enhancement that's already been reported there. I think we definitely need more feedback in terms of working out where to concentrate the resources.
So this was I think this was a cool demo because it definitely showed how multiple modules can live together, and the modules that you showed were obviously created by the same developer, but they didn't necessarily have to be. So I think that was a good demo. On the this isn't related to document library, but for things like just share config in general, are we at a point yet where two different share config custom files can coexist?
So extensibility modules can now provide the code that you previously would need to put in a share config custom file. So hopefully that if you do need global config, it can now go into an extensibility module, I would hope. Again,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really show that here, but it is another one of the topics that Dave Draper covered on his blog.
Okay, cool. So that means, I mean, really, when people are doing, you know, even simple metadata extensions in Share, they really ought to be using the new sort of extension module sort of framework, even for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I would encourage people to use these modules for anything like that.
Okay, great. Very good. Well, let me check the question queue here, and let's see if anyone has. No one's chatted anything, so everything is must be clear as day. Oh, wait a minute. Here's something. Is the media viewers add-on compatible with 4.1.2 Enterprise?
Yeah, I think one of the things with ShareX's is we've tried to keep for the, you'll see 2.x downloads and 0.x downloads. Well, the 0.x downloads are 3.x compatible, and the 2.x downloads should be or designed to be compatible with all 4.x versions of Alfresco. So that certainly works for backwards compatibility. For the configuration that I showed there, whereby I magically added a module and it changed the configuration of the web preview component, you'll see if you look in the documentation, it documents that only works on 4.2. You know, because the work of putting that configuration into the model hadn't been done before then. So, you know, we've made sure that it won't blow up if you add that module to a 4.1 installation. But if you are using 4.1, you need to go in and you need to override. Yes, I do mean override the .get.config.xml file. So, yeah, I think 4.2 is a great example on that front because it allows us to get rid of overriding some of those last few files that we were having to override on the class path there in web extension. But you know, you can still do that if you're a sysadmin. It's just that in 4.2, it's a little bit easier because you can just use the module.
Right, exactly. All right, so it sounds like anything on Share Extras that's 0.x, that should work on Alfresco 3.x, and anything that's 2.x should work on Alfresco 4.x, Community Edition, or Enterprise Edition.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a couple of compatibility issues with 4.2, so forwards compatibility issues. Some of those are reported in the issues section and are currently being worked on. But if something's not reported and you discover an issue, then I definitely encourage people to report that as well.
Okay, and here this will probably be our last question from Tara. Tara is asking if it is possible to have custom previews for Excel files that would allow people to scroll to the right on spreadsheets that are very large or very wide.
Yeah, that's a good question, Tara. I mean, certainly it's quite easy to add custom previewers, and you could say, for Excel spreadsheets, use this custom previewer in preference to the Flash viewer. There are some interesting projects out there. There's a beta viewer within the media viewers add-on, that uses a project called WebODF. Now that actually needs a couple of additional files adding to it because I think it's an LGPL license, which isn't compatible with Share Extras, unfortunately, that the original software is licensed under. But WebODF will do that sort of thing for ODF documents, and it'll render an open document spreadsheet directly in HTML using some JavaScript. In the same way that the viewer that we saw was rendering a PDF directly into HTML using JavaScript. So there is stuff out there that will do the job. It's just a case of finding the right library.
Yeah, I mean, what about doing native? Isn't there? Doesn't Office have native sort of web components? I guess it would maybe only work in IE, but I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I think there might be a native in-browser sort of way to work with Office documents. Maybe someone could write a previewer to invoke those controls.
Yeah, or you could use the Google Docs integration with Alfresco 4.2.
Yeah, but then it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be in the viewer. No.
Yeah.
But you can, you can send a document off to Google Docs and then bring it back in when you're finished with it.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, this was cool as usual, and definitely if you are doing any new Share customizations and you're building those on 4.2, you should be using this new module framework for sure. So is there, I almost hate to ask the question, is beyond the blog posts and the Tech Talk Lives, is there documentation on some of these new directives and the module extensibility framework?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly tutorials available, such as the slides that Dave did during his Tech Talk Live that talked to the principles. Yeah, I mean, I do think that Dave and Eric did a great walkthrough, a practical walkthrough at DevCon. That's again on the site. In terms of reference docs, the reality is the best reference docs we have today is Dave's blog, which is something we're all aware of. But there's still a lot of stuff on there that's really useful in terms of reference material, and it's still pretty accurate. And he's updating it, as these things change.
All right. Well, maybe one of these days you and Dave and who knows, some other folks will get some time to maybe help fix that with a formal document of some sort. I don't want to use the word book, but
that would be great.
All right, cool. All right, well, great. Well, thanks everybody, and we will be right back here on our first Wednesday schedule. So I believe that's March 6th for episode 63, and Mike Farman will be joining us. And looks like maybe we'll be talking about metadata and actions. I'm not sure is that accurate, Max? I thought we were going to do some roadmap stuff as well, huh?
No, that is accurate. Mike weighed it up, and he preferred to talk about this following on from Will's Tech Talk today.
Okay, well, I'm going to, everyone join us for that, and we'll talk about metadata and actions, but I'm also going to get him to talk about the roadmap too, because I think a lot of people are interested in that. So we'll ambush Mike with that topic next month.
Yeah.
So, all right, great. Well, we'll see everybody back here on March 6th.